It's time for basketball, and Uber Eats is dropping deals on game day favorites to keep you locked in on the action. Like when you're craving a buzzer beater, but also buffalo wings. Or when an upset makes you want to ugly cry into a pizza. And right now, Uber Eats has game day deals from Burger King, Buffalo Wild Wings, KFC, and hundreds more local favorites. So you can keep your eyes on the ball and your hands on a burger. Order now, only on Uber Eats. Product availability varies by region. See app for details.
Are your ulcerative colitis symptoms proving difficult to manage? Tremfya guselkumab can help you manage the cycle of UC symptoms. At 1 year, many patients taking Tremfya achieved clinical remission, and some patients also achieved endoscopic remission. Individual results may vary. Tremfya is a prescription medicine used to treat adults with moderately to severely active ulcerative colitis. Serious allergic reactions and increased risk of infections may occur. Before treatment, your doctor should check you for infections and TB. Tell your doctor if you have an infection, flu-like symptoms, or if you need a vaccine. Ask your doctor if Tremfya can help you manage the cycle of UC symptoms. Call 1-800-526-7736 to learn more, or visit tremfyaradio.com.
Uh-oh. The last cookie.
You can get a new box of cookies in as fast as an hour with Walmart Express Delivery.
Are you my guilty self-conscience?
No, I'm the voice offering you promo code EXPRESS for free delivery on your first order.
Hey, who ate my cookies?
You mean, these cookies?
Order now. Welcome to your Walmart. Promotion valid for first express delivery order. $50 minimum subject to availability. Restrictions apply.
A philosophy within it that will aid people, will aid their mental health, will aid their anxiety and all the rest of it. And my honest opinion is
Hello, I'm your host, Les Bubka. Welcome to Anxious Black Belt, a podcast that focuses on karate, mental health, and everything in between. If you enjoy our content and would like to support us, best way to do that is to listen to another episode, share with your friends, and leave us a review. All this stuff helps the mysterious algorithm to introduce our podcast to new audience. Thank you for joining me, and let's listen to the episode. Welcome again, Hanshi Marc. Always pleasure to have you. And today we're going to be talking about your latest book. Fifth one, isn't it?
it's the fifth one. Yes, it actually follows a logical sequence. So I thought you might ask about this. So I laid the logical sequence out for you. Right. So how it started was I wrote a little 8-page A5 folder for my students on Bushido and the Bushido virtues and my interpretation of them. And Kancho Eric von Wernberg, who runs the IPK, saw this and he just went like, this is like really good. Can you expand it and make it, we can get it in like a book to give to people. So, excuse me, I have this here. Put this down here. So this was the first incantation of it, right? Which is it's quite nice. It's larger than the normal books. But then I had so many requests for it from abroad and from people that I ran out. I just ran out. And I'm doing what you do and what other instructors do, all of us, I think, do. I'm pretty much giving them away for free. Because people are like, oh, wow, my friend has got it. It's so good. Could I get a signed copy? I'd be so. So the next thing I did was I then put it onto Amazon. So anybody could get it. So you see the difference in size. Sorry, you see the difference in size and stuff like this. Yeah. And to my absolute, I would say delight, but I think also a little bit of horror, right? It got to number 9 in the martial arts section, awesome. Of Amazon. I'm not saying in Amazon, obviously. No, but in the martial arts section, it got to number 9. And I was like blown away by this. I couldn't, and like you, because I know you do this, when you put your book on, it says, this is how much it costs. How much do you want to put it out for? And you put it out for pennies. Come on, we make nothing off these books. We want people to learn from these books or to have a good experience or to make them think a little bit or stuff like this, So after I did that, I thought about what I would really, really like to publish as a book, a much more technical kind of book. And then I did this one.
Which I love. It's one of
Yeah,
my favorite books.
yeah, which I put a lot of my heart and my soul into kind of doing this. So after I did that, I thought, you know, it sounds like I'm. I started thinking to myself, look, it's all about you. There's so many wonderful people out there that I've met that can tell stories, that I could collect these stories. So I put about to about 80 people, and that was and which you kindly donated as well, which I thank you for yet again, right? Which was for this one. Okay. However, unlike yourself, many people 3 months in, I would send them an email and say, how's the story going? It doesn't have to be big, just something like that. I'm looking at it. You'll probably get it next month or something like this, So I got so fed up with this collaborative work without realizing how difficult a collaborative work can be, because you don't want to chase people up too much because they're giving their time and effort. They're being kind. You don't want to put it out. Yeah. So in the meantime, I did this one, which is another quite weighty textbook. It's quite a weighty textbook, So I put this one together, which I had been working on in the background for a few years, but it was kind of aimless. You have a piece of work that drifts about and you don't really kind of know where it's going. But then developing the Budo virtues, I suddenly had a clear goal I could send it towards, so I could extrapolate all my old information. So that one then came out. That one did really quite well as well. So. And then this one came out. And so all these books are getting into the top 20s now, which is like unbelievable. For me, it's unbelievable. I think this got to number 12, I think. I think it was just like kind of unbelievable. And finally, I had been developing all the stuff from the first book about the Budo virtues. And so what I started to look at is looking at them and just saying, like, these are only any of value or easy to do if you have internalized them. So the important part is you internalize them. So you actually also, are you being loyal to yourself and your beliefs? Are you being respectful to yourself? This ties in very closely with the mental health stuff, because that way it becomes easier to have them externalized. You can externalize them. So I put I don't know, honestly, Les, I put so much time and effort. I don't know if you've flicked through it. It's massive.
I started reading it. I was picking stuff. I got lots of books to read, but I tried to read 3 books in the same time. But one thing which struck me, and I'm gonna read it out because it resonates with me so much, and I think it ties up with what we've been talking in our previous conversation. If you haven't listened to that one, go and track it because it's very valuable about the child development book. But your quote here is, sometimes the fight is not with another person, but with the demons created by those who should have loved us the most. I think this is so powerful and hits very, very deep into why I'm in karate.
And myself, which is why I think very often when we're chatting to each other, we kind of resonate with this whole thing. Because so if you said to me, look, why are you doing martial arts? And I had to compress it into something quite single, because obviously things develop. They start as a single seed and then they flower outwards and they become something quite different after a while. But it's really, I wanted to be able to defend my mother better. Mm-hmm. And that's why at the beginning, there's an autobiography kind of ish about the genesis of why I do Kyokushin Budōkai Goshin, which is just the kind of non-sport version of Kaicho John Blooming's Kyokushin Budōkai. That's all it is. And in that, and I was sat one day, and bizarrely, I'm really glad you picked up on that, because that came to me in a flash. Sometimes these things do. Mm-hmm. And I always have a notebook on me. I always carry a notebook. I know people nowadays use phones because they're much cleverer than me. But I love a notebook. I pull a notebook out and I write. My poor wife is constantly coming around going like, what about this notebook? And I'm going, where did you find that? I've been looking for that notebook. And I look back through and I go, there's some half decent stuff in here. I can probably use it, But I was sat there and I thought, where is the fire coming from? Where is the wind that is blowing the sails of my journey throughout life? And that is it. It's fighting those demons, because as a young child, I would try to interfere with my father beating my mother, and then he would turn on me.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem was, you'll probably see it in there. There's a picture of my father in there.
Yeah.
And, he was really good at boxing. He wasn't some kind of skinny guy who was angry at the world and just took it out on his wife and then his children as well. Well, no, that's not true, actually, because he never touched my sister. He never ever touched my sister. And my sister actually really saved me from some bad beatings. She developed this technique. I remember one time my father punched me in the face and I staggered back and I fell on my back and he advanced on me, and I was stunned and I didn't know what I was doing. And my sister, who's 2 years younger than me, Vanessa, she ran into the room. She dived on top of me, right, and in a feat of extraordinary acrobatics, rolled and landed on me on her back. And as my dad is trying to hit me, she's putting her face in the way.
Mm-hmm.
And he never did ever hit my sister. And he just got frustrated and left. And very often she would intervene if she was around and kind of genuinely protect me, which is a strange thing to say when your younger sister is protecting you.
Yeah.
Not by any kind of physical means, but by the fact she knew. But this kind of attitude that he had develops its own demons within you.
Mm-hmm.
I suffer sometimes, or I used to, not so much now, but I used to have to work so hard at controlling rage. Just ridiculous things like trying to put a screw in a plug, and it slips, and the screwdriver bangs into that. Like, that is the universe having a go at me. I would become enraged. I would become enraged by it.
I've got similar stuff, but the thing that frustrates me the most, because I'm aware of it, is that's always the little things. If something really bad happens, Home as anything, but the little things, I just lose temper so much. And I see that sometimes with my kids as well. I don't know, they do something really bad, no problem. But they do like a little thing, you drop the food there and it just goes, poof, fire
Yeah.
is there. And I don't know where that comes from, but it's just, when it's something major, you can contain it and you see the bigger picture, I suppose. But when it's the little things, you lose that bigger picture and focus on the minute things.
I always have this joke that I have this kind of, I wish I had his strength, but I have this kind of enraged Hulk-like figure, like the original Hulk, who was just rage. It was originally written. There was no kind of nuances to the Hulk. It was just pure rage, And I have them behind all these doors: rationality, kindness, resilience, self-discipline. I have him behind all these doors, but I keep him in check. But occasionally, it's a good quote, occasionally these doors turn to balsa wood. Straight through. I've stood on something on the floor. The universe is doing it again. It's the universe picking on me. But like yourself, one of the other things I noted in the child development book, I says, just like beauty is in the eye of the beholder, so too is violence.
Mm-hmm.
And very often, particularly when I used to work the nightclubs, I would see acts of quite terrible violence that would have very little effect on me.
Mm-hmm.
The violence, I've seen people get glassed and stabbed and stuff like this, and you instantly go quite cold. You just deal with it. You're dealing with the person, dealing with the first aid, that kind of stuff never kind of resonates, But then somebody turning around and grabbing his girlfriend and shaking her because she's annoyed him or something, balsa wood doors. Balsa wood doors. That's my kryptonite.
I suppose it's all going back to protecting a female, right?
For
Like
me,
your
yes.
mom, sister.
Protecting my mother.
Yeah.
No, my sister didn't need protecting. She protected me, which is the weird kind of wonderful joy to have in life, that she would actually stand and he would try and hit me and she would go and move into his fist range and he would stop and then he would calm down and then wouldn't shout at her. He would just turn and walk away, at that particular point.
I can't remember the quote. I'm probably not gonna be. Oh no, the Karl Marx's quote, and there's another quote in there saying that the martial arts or everything is the experience. It's a story of the experience of the person, something like that. I won't find it now because I know what's happening. Every time I try to find something, I just got panicked and
I'm
can't
the
find it.
same.
You know what I mean, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
there's something which brought me to thinking about my martial arts expression. It is all the compilation of your experiences that expresses itself through martial arts, right? And that's how
Yeah.
you develop the Kyokushin Budōkai Goshin Do, because that's
Yeah.
your kind of
Yeah.
expression and
Yeah.
take on
How,
the
so
blooming
my mother
stuff.
was a slight woman. She was petite. She was very
Hmm.
pretty. She was petite. She was Cornish, you know. And so the whole thing about it, my father was like in the I think it was 64. He was all forces Mediterranean boxing champion. Middleweight, he was really good at boxing, as was my uncle. My uncle, both was a family of really good boxers. So one of the things I was developing is what can I develop so my mother could beat my father. The way I use it in my club is how can a 48, 50-kilo woman beat a heavyweight Thai boxer?
Hmm.
You know, so we have to cut through anything that's associated with strength. We have to cut through anything that's associated with repetitive hitting. You know, so I do this a number system. I don't know if you've ever done this. The number system, we end up with 4 high numbers, and then I say to people when I'm teaching them, I say go. If I'm teaching women's classes, I say you always go for your high numbers. So if we take 1 as pretty crap, it's not really, like slapping you on the chest like this to stop you
Hmm.
hurting me, and up to 10, which is highly effective. We then kind of what we do is we look at the head and we just say, like, okay, so you throw a punch and I drop my head naturally, like this, and you hit the top of my head. What are you going to give that in a scale of 1 to 10? Maybe you get 3 to 4, but you probably will end up with a boxer's break as well, because it's an incredibly. And then we work down this, or if it's hit really good, you could get yourself maybe a 6 or 7 or stuff. So we work our way down like this. And I say, okay, so you come at me and I jab you. What am I going to get for that? You know that's going to be a 9 to 10, because you get what's called an autonomic reaction. I stick my finger in your eye and you will, without thinking about it, turn that eye away from me. Yeah. So then we then work down the body, giving it numbers, and then we end up with 4, which are basically the eyes, the throat, the groin, and the knees, which is very much what Gojo-Ryu kind of worked towards, and then when I'm teaching the women's self-defense stuff, and then they'll come around and then maybe they might particularly, I use this term called a go-to technique.
Hmm.
So if a guy who does boxing is suddenly confronted with people out in the street, his go-to is probably to like boom, 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 throw in. If they do judo, their go-to is to grab. Maybe try and throw the guy to the ground and then run away at that point. So you have these go-tos. And some of the problems I find when I'm teaching people who have like the really good martial artists is to get them to switch from their go-to technique to an effective technique, which will be like an eye jab or maybe a punch to the throat, or maybe your bladed weapons, your shutos or something, like just shoot somebody in the throat and then run away as fast as you can, kick them in the groin or the bladder, or just really kick into the shin or the kneecap and then again run away. There's the 4 things. If they can't see, they can't hurt you. If they can't breathe, they can't hurt you. If they can't think, as in you've kicked them in the groin and pain is overwhelming them, they can't hurt you. And if they can't run, they can't hurt you. Or if they can't work, they can't hurt you. So it's kind of like a chaining ladder down. You know what I mean? You go for the eyes, so they flip like this, and then you just run away. And that's the thing I say: 1 hit if you can, and then run. And if possible, white knight. White knighting?
No, but you can tell me.
So white knighting is this. You're walking down the street with your wife. A girl comes around the corner, obviously distressed. Maybe her blouse is ripped or she's bleeding or something like that. And she's screaming for help. You are instantly white knighting.
Mm-hmm.
The old white knight is the good guy, black
Yeah.
knight is the bad guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The old white hat, black hat kind of idea. You are instantly white knighting. And I say to women, if you get the chance, start screaming for help, because you'll be stunned at the amount of guys that will then white knight will come down to protect you. It's kind of inbuilt in us. It's kind of inbuilt in most guys I know.
Yeah, well, if you've got the moral compass, then for sure.
Yeah, you should do. Yeah, you should do.
In terms of development of the Kyokushin Budōkai Goshin Do, how many attempts and changes you had? I'm coming from because mine, I am halfway where you are, and I already got like 7 versions of my syllabus, And every year it's, oh, I shouldn't think about this. I need to change it. How many changes did you do over your life, and how long it took you to develop your own version?
You mean the current version?
Yeah. The one you're working on now.
I actually say in the book, the number of times I say to my students, that's it, I think we've got it. And they just kind of roll their eyes. Oh, okay. So the way I've kind of satisfied myself, because one of the demons I have is I have a two-sided coin. I have a kind of syndrome where I can't remember what they actually call it now. Where you believe that one day people wake up and they think you just be rubbish. It's kind of like a fake persona syndrome. And the other side of that coin that comes with that, is perfectionism.
Mm-hmm.
So I always keep thinking I can do better. I always keep thinking, I think, one day people are going to wake up and just say, like, actually, Mark, you're rubbish. And so I keep pushing and pushing. And that also comes from my father, who was constantly telling me I was rubbish, constantly telling me I was useless. I remember one time.
It's like an imposter syndrome, right? Dunning-Kruger.
Imposter syndrome. That is it. Thank you. I couldn't remember the name of it. Yeah, it's imposter syndrome. But the other side of imposter syndrome is perfectionism. Which is something it's like Weber calls an ideal type. It cannot exist. It cannot really exist within yourself, because, well, time changes you. You're not the same person you were 10 years ago, all this kind of stuff. So for myself, this perfectionism is always constantly trying to smooth edges, to make it better, to make it, So how I've kind of dealt with that with myself now is I have my core syllabus that gives you all the skills you need within the core syllabus to be able to go on and develop other stuff. So we have some wrist locks, but these are further up. So your first two gradings are everything you need to survive. So if you only came and did your yellow tabs and your yellow belt, your 10th Q and 9th Q, you would have enough to get by in the street. You have your elbow drills, you have your eye jabs, you have a groin kick, you have enough to get by. Then later on, as we move up through the grades, you start to look at kind of your pain compliant techniques. So if I'm trying to turn you into like a hikikazushi or hikimawashi or something like this, you have your pain compliant techniques. And the only reason they really work on two levels is, one, internally, I know I've got my eye jab in case it all goes wrong. And two, it gives you the kind of confidence to go ahead and work with the stuff you're doing. If that makes any kind of sense.
Yeah.
So now, so what I'm doing is I've developed a syllabus that our friend Jürgen, you know Jürgen?
Yeah.
There he is.
Yep.
He got a copy of the book and he was talking to me about it, and he called it.
He gives those books to everybody. I've been blessed with it as well.
Yeah, and it's lovely. He always writes something beautiful in it. It's so lovely. And Jürgen said to me, "It's really nice." He said, "It's a deep dive." And that for me, for somebody who I think is a really talented man, not just a martial artist, but a really talented, smart guy. For him to turn around and read my book and say it's a deep dive, I took that as like a real, one of the few compliments that for a short time I was happy with.
Yeah. It is, talking about Jürgen, for me it was like I knew about him from the Ashihara books and from my teacher, but I never thought I'm gonna meet him. And then Christian, oh, that's my one friend Jürgen. That Jürgen? And now I'm teaching with him actually in October. We're doing a seminar together in Germany. So it's like, it's like a dreams come true, you never thought about being amongst those great people who've been developing the Ashihara karate, and then it's like, wow, he's nearly my friend.
I've known Jürgen, I think, since 91. In 91 on Ashihara Karate, in 91, I went to the second Ashihara summer camp in Videbæk in Denmark. The first one was in 1990, and Shihan David Cook was the one that was really promoting at that time. I mean, and the Swiss and the Danes were unbelievable. I mean, at that point, they were just absolutely incredible. They were super sharp. But of course the German guys were coming in, and then we started to come in. But of all the British guys that came in, I was the only one that stuck with it. Until I think eventually, I think it was in '95. So they asked me in '92 because I was already a sandan, a third dan. So they asked me in '92 to redo my sandan. But I remember thinking, are you joking? This is incredible, this system. I am not ready to be a sandan in Ashihara Karate. I'm just not. It's too good. I don't know if that you ever get that sometimes. So in '92, I did my Nidan, and then I did my 40-man fight, and ending up with Martin Van Emmen. I don't know if you know who Martin Van Emmen is.
I had the name, but I don't know.
World Thai boxing champion at that time. Oof. Ooh. I mean, they kind of dragged me like a prisoner of war into the shower. Just left me there with all the shower nozzles pointed at me. I was just laid there, just going, "Oh, I'll be out next week." It was just like he wasn't mean, but oofed. I mean, honestly, I remember everyone, even now to this day, every blow going into my thigh and me just collapsing down on that. You know, it was the longest. I think it was 2-minute rounds back then, maybe a minute and a half, 2 minutes. I can't remember. It was the longest time in my life. And then in '93, some of the Danish students came across to Scotland, so I got to work with some of the really Morten Wagner, Thomas Fredriksson. These were really good dimes. Melina, Morten's sister, was there at the same time. They were all great Ashihara students, and so I got to train. In fact, me and Morten are still really good friends to this day. Unfortunately, pardon?
You are still involved in Ashihara. I've seen the other day that you've been in Ashihara camp.
So what I do is so for example, Tommy will love this, right? So for example, I do these things called schoolboy locks and schoolboy throws. Okay. Why do schoolboys do them? Because they work and they're simple. Right? They're not I don't have to slide under a lapel, pull this lapel, move my hip 45 degrees, collapse this leg. So when they were looking at when you're taking a corner, going hikimoshi into maki kamanagi. So very often, not always, but very often, I do a double pull on the hikimoshi. So if you're doing hikimoshi, you have to be really careful, myself included. So I'm going to talk about myself. That way I don't blame anybody. We have to be really careful. We don't start to Aikido things. So very often in Aikido, you spend the first year learning to fall. Someone twists my wrists, I'll roll, right? And then what happens is you grip somebody's wrist, you do it, and they go, no. You know, and all of a sudden it's not working the way it could. And very often when you've gone into hikimoshi, into maki kamanagi, people are rolling with them. And I've seen people at gradings where people are on their 30-man fight, 29 fights, and somebody's gripped and tried to do it, and the person's moved out of it because they rebalance. You know, so the whole trick of the hikimoshi is you have to work like a kind of screw and come in. So you have to pull the person in because the fastest bit of the wheel that spins is the center. You have to get them over their angle so their feet can't keep up. You know, that's basically what you're doing. And then you apply pressure, not here, but here. Yeah. Tip it into the head, or either push it forward or turn it in, depending which way you want. Yeah. And then the person, you have your maki kamanagi. Very often these fail, but here's something I want you to try. Take the corner, as you normally do, and the first thing, pull in. So the person does this first. They don't go forward.
I think that's our way. So I like to. You need to pull it. You need to use that hikite for balancing.
Turn. Yeah. We do a double turn. So we pull in, do a turn and turn again to get the kind of centrifugal force going. So, but what happens is if you miss, they just bend and they're still there. So I was showing them headlocks. You know, the old schoolboy headlocks about how to use this part of your thumb under here. How to go into a chancery if you fail, if you miss on the jaw and you've come up the face, how to use this bit onto a chancery under the cheekbone, you know, the old wrestling chancery holds, you know, and then how you can throw from them, the different kinds of throws you have. You have one which puts extraordinary pressure on the neck if you do it right, you know, which we didn't do. We looked at it, but we didn't do. And what happens if you only get them so far, then you can do a cross buttock throw, you know, because you've got hold of the neck. And in a street fight, you watch any street fight, the most common things is guys are gripping each other around the neck. Yeah. you know, and that's what happens. They get in, they throw their punches, and they grab you around the neck, or you know. So I go to the Ashihara, and because I have a Yondan in Ashihara, I know what they want. So what I like to do is I just like to show, well, let's have a look at something a little different, but it'll work perfectly fine with what you're doing, and it's not outside your knowledge base of what you're doing. So I often call these stuff that's very simple but highly effective. I call it schoolboy throws. It's kind of things you did at school, schoolboy throws, and then how to counter if someone gets you with the chancery, how to counter it. That's all. So yeah, so I was over there with it was Marcel and Vanessa Vanderberg's camp, and the great Dave Yonkers was there. You know, so who I've known again since '91. You know, he's another one I've known. Yeah, they absolutely are. Yeah, you know, and I you know, as well as Marcel's obviously a very close friend of mine, and there's also German Marcel van der Schaaf from Bonn. He does Ashihara Goshindo, really good little system where he's based a whole Goshin system. He's jiu-jitsu. We always say jiu-jitsu over here, but in Germany they say jiu-jitsu. You know, and he's like extraordinary. He was on the camp as well. I would sometimes look at him and I'd give my right arm to be able to throw how you can throw. If this fails, do this. If this fails, do this. If this fails, do this. I'm going, mate, I can't do the first one. I'll just throw myself on the ground.
It is funny how always there is something else that people can do better than we, and you're just like, I wish I can do that. Oh, I wish I can do that. It's like, I think that's the beauty of martial arts, because wherever you go and you find your niche, that you like stuff, then you excel. But there's always somebody else excelling in something else that you can learn and improve your stuff.
Yeah, there's an old saying. I don't know if you've heard this before. If you want to learn good kung fu, and in them days it was for self, it was like for proper defense. You know, if you want to learn good kung fu, learn from an old master, because he can't afford to do any kind of aerobatics or anything. And I'm increasingly becoming like that. You know, I keep looking and going like, nah, I'm not going to roll around on the ground with anybody anymore. You know, I'm just just not going to do that. You know, so the other side I think is lacking, and I'm not saying it's not there. I'm just saying it's lacking. And again, it's something that I'm wanting to build in. If I said to you, right now, I'm using you as a kind of everyman example. You know, if I said to you, will you go over there and teach a low kick into a throw into an armbar combination? Anything, do what you want. You can go uchimomo, inner thigh kick, outer thigh kick. You can hikimoshi, you can uranagi, you can headlock. I don't care. And then when you're on the ground, just teach some sort of. It can be either a snap before tap move, or it can be a pain compliant move, as in you keep them in spot till the police turn up by using pain. You know, you would be like, okay, it's no problem. You know, but if I said, you've got 10 minutes, go over there and teach those people over there the history of Bushido, which everybody loves to quote in martial arts. We are some samurai stock. We do bush. We are Budo. We are Budoka. And you go, what does that mean? I think I told you this before. The reason that first book came out, I was in, where was I? Switzerland. I was stood next to this, how can I put this politely? Rather large fourth Dan who wasn't really doing a great deal. And a couple of boys had a bit of a rammy going on. They were kind of like, they're getting a little bit diggy, you know, with each other, because I think we were just a bit annoyed. And he nudged me and he pointed, and I looked and I was like, okay, boys being boys kind of idea. And he says, bad Budo. And I stood there for a while and I went, no. And he says, what do you mean? I said, that's like saying bad kindness. Right? I says, wouldn't it be better to say an absence of Budo? I says, as opposed to bad Budo, you know? And he was like, maybe, I don't know. And he walked off. And then I was like, and I was just thinking, and I used to wander around and speak to people about it, about, you know, what you classify Budo as. And the answers were sometimes like, I've never really given it much thought. You know, when really it should be cemented as two sides. We can, you know, we can do better. I'm not saying, okay, I can do better. I don't want to pull anybody in on this, and then we're going like to hear him. He's talking about how we're doing crap stuff. You know, I can do better. You know, but part of the reason of this is as you go through it, I think you can see, I cover every single. I remove the word Bushido virtues out of it because of Imperial Bushido, which I write about. I clearly state why I call it Budo virtues, the virtues of doing Budo. I mean, if just swap the sentence about, it's like percentage, isn't it? What's 6% of 25? And you go, I don't know. And you go, okay, what's 25% of 6? And you go, like, is that easy? I mean, kind of swapping stuff about. So I wanted to have a book where anybody, if they really wanted to develop what they were doing, could pick the book up and read it and just go, this has saved me so much time. So now I understand why he uses Budo virtues instead of Bushido. Bushido will never die. I mean, we have modern day Bushido, but it's a little bit watered down. I mean, if you read the book about it, there's a guy called Benishe, and he actually went to Tokyo where they digitalize everything. And before, I think it was 1898, there were only 5 manuals or 5 things that mentioned Bushido. Only 5. Okay. And one of them was a French novel. After Netobi published Bushido in America, it was published in California first. It wasn't published in Japan. It was taken across to Japan. Yeah, it was taken across to Japan, and then it was translated. Then you're looking for a bridge between, into the Meiji era. They're becoming industrialized. People are feeling like they're losing their own sense of who they are as a people. What have we got? What have we got? What we could nowadays use, we could say like, well, we have chivalry. Chivalry is absolutely unique to the European lifestyle. So people, if they wanted, could use chivalry as the bridge, and then, but of course, then what happened is people were like, yeah, this is great. We can be this, we can be this. Then I think it was 1904, the Japanese Navy, which was based on the British Navy. So Japan, as it developed its forces, it went, oh, France are really good at this. Germans are really good at this. We'll take that, that, and that. But obviously at that time, Britain had the greatest Navy in the world at that time. Japan beat Russia. Actually, so all of a sudden now, this is rising and rising. And then Bushido got linked with xenophobia. It got linked with, this is who we are. Then we have the whole problems with Manchuria, Nanking, all this kind of stuff. And it came up until eventually, after I think 1945, 46, you'll find very little being written about Bushido. Very little. It became a taboo subject within the Japanese community, and then later on it started to come in, but in a new way, corporate Bushido. How, use Bushido to develop your video business, to use Bushido to develop your anxious black belt, sports stuff and all the rest of it. But when I was looking to try and find a simple philosophy. People don't like complexity. No, okay. I don't like complexity. I involved everyone in my demon then. I don't like complexity. I use the KISS philosophy. Keep it simple, stupid. You know what I mean? And I say that to myself all the time. Is this KISS? Am I doing it right? Am I just overthinking? Am I making this overcomplicated? And so I started looking for a kind of martial arts kind of philosophy. And that conversation with the guy that I had was the spark for I had lots of stuff I'd written up, but again, like I said, it was like this. It didn't have a path. It didn't have a way. It was just dithering around like this, and it needed a path. And as soon as I knew exactly where I was going with this, everything just went, it just fell into line perfectly. And then that's when I started looking at it, and I was like, I don't want to call it Bushido. I don't really want to call it Bushido. I can see where that comes from, but the linkage is with Imperial Bushido, from the Second World War. And then I just thought, well, don't complicate it. Just call it Budo virtues, but hyphenate it as one word. It's now hyphenated as a word. It never used to be. It was 2 capitalized letters, but now I've hyphenated it, which again is me just developing things as I go along.
It's really good. But that's what you have to do, right? It's your own expression of things, and you can take it and mold it into your versions of it. On the contrary, I love complicated stuff. That's why I'm not doing a self-defense, right? I'm doing a joyful expression of martial arts where we can play with all those complicated stuff and million components techniques, because that's what I enjoy as a pastime. But I understand that, in a self-defense that wouldn't work. So you need to have that clarity what you do, but you have to be honest to yourself what you enjoy and follow that path. Um, was John Blooming, supportive in your development of your art? I think that he
Supportive,
always
and he
been.
inputted.
Mm.
Yeah, and
Can you?
he inputted. Yeah. So one of the things I always notice, this a lot of the stuff within the self-defense stuff comes from my experience of working in nightclubs, you know, and one of the things. So that's an okay hand, you can see, and that's one. Can you see?
Yeah.
Oh, oh, bad mark, during a fight, like claw of death for the rest of for 3 weeks, kind of idea. So John Blooming introduced the shotes, whereas John Blooming would often do his shotes from back here, almost like this, but like this,
From the
then
Hikite position.
yeah. So he would be back here. So I really like the idea of using the open hand stuff, because it's I go into quite a lot of detail in the book about why we tend to use shotes. There's symbolism behind it. It's part of my badge, which you can see on the kind of the front of the book. You can see that there's a hand on the front of the book. So it's the hand, it's the thing that supports all of it. It's also a universal whoa. It's not a what. It's like that, that kind of idea. And one of the things I developed with him was a kime uke, a kime shote. So very often the position, if somebody steps into you, very often the thing you have to watch out is what we call the T position. Okay, so very often if somebody steps into somebody's face like this, people put their hand on their chest, like easy, mate, easy, but you can still float around that. Do you see what I mean? I've seen so many young doormen, young as in like they're new on the job, just go like, easy, mate. And the guy just boom over the top, just spins, just turns on the hand and just chins on the jaw from that position. So we have a thing called bicep control. So as you come in, it's a transitory position. It's not a position you stay there for ages, but you lock up on the biceps. You turn your head in, you raise your shoulder up. This is hinged, it's weak, so you raise the shoulder up, you lock onto here, you drop your head, which means you can also, if you're entering, you can also headbutt really quickly, hit with the head. That stuns. That might be enough for you just then to, from that position, move to the shoulders and push them out. But when I'm here, if I've done the block and I think, I have to give him a shockwave, give him a little bit of a shock to mean that, instead of coming like this, boom, right? It floats in like this.
It's a snappy movement of the wrist, right?
It's the snap movement. So come here and then boom from here. And we actually work on pads from that. We actually work on that from pads. And I tell you what else we use, which is really handy. Shinai. A shinai is really good if you're holding it. You can hit into it. It gives. It gives. It's a solid one. It's not like you're hitting a pad. Because when you do these on pads, you can't hold a Thai pad like this. Because your hand hyperextends. You have to tip it down and you have to hit the top. Yeah. Like this, so boom, boom, swing it back up, and then you can come in with it this way. So we basically have, if we look at Moashi Shoti Uche, okay, if we look at that, we basically got two of those. We basically have the sliding back, holy crap, and slap. Like power slap as you're going backwards because you're not breathing. Or if we can get in close enough, we'll snap in this way with it, working it from here. It really depends under the stress you're put under, because it's all very well standing there in a dojo just going, I think I would do this. When somebody's got you by the lapels and they're running you towards a wall, it's very different. No. It's a very different sort of thing. So John Blooming, when I spoke to Kaicho about it, I used to kind of phone him up and speak to him about it. Sometimes I would go over to Debuilt to his house and discuss stuff with him. And the thing that always stunned me about Kaicho was he never once said, which I sometimes say, I'll have to have a think about that. That's a good point. I'll have a think about that. Let me go away and mull it through my head for a while, and I'll come back and I'll probably have an answer for you. He always just went like, well, why don't you just do this? And you go, It's so simple, so effective. And also inside your head, you're going, and why didn't you think of that, Marcus? And he would do these little boom, 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 so yeah, he was very old school. Obviously, his fighting position was very different to what you see most people seeing today. He had this almost kind of tray position, and he would be in Nico Achidachi stance the whole time, very often. Woomph. You see, there's a famous picture of him hitting Dave Yonkers with a shote. He goes, woomph, and then he turns, he goes, and I knock him out. You see Dave, his spine do this. I mean, I've been hit with one by him, accidentally. He's been talking, and I've been up there as his UK kind of idea, and boom, he's hit the top of my head. Oy, oy. And it wasn't full power, and it wasn't with intent, And I remember thinking, Jesus, I got hit with one of those back in the day. I'd wonder what month it was, let alone what day it was. Yeah. So he was really kind and very enthusiastic about the idea, And what's going to be happening this year, I'm kind of putting it all together at the moment, is we're currently looking at the IBK having a Goshin division. So I'm bringing out things called, I'm looking at it, I'm bringing out things which has to be run through the board. I know I'm a member of the board, but it still have to run through the member of the board. They're extraordinary men, Tom Madsen and Eric von Berenberg, they're like extraordinary guys with so much experience between them. Is like, so an essential would be, if you want to join the Goshin division, you have to be a Goshin club. You just don't say, oh yeah, we do half an hour on the last Sunday of every month. We do some Goshin, because then you don't have a go-to. Your go-to will always be Yakuza Chudan or something. Do you know what I mean? So it would have to be a club. There would have to be a process in it where people would evolve as part of that process. So we have an essential thing, and then we have a desirable. I think it is very desirable that you can impart a philosophy within it that will aid people, will aid their mental health, will aid their anxiety, and all the rest of it. And my honest opinion is the Budo virtues allow you to do that, because you're entering in interaction with universal positive attributes. You're being respectful, you're being kind, you know what I mean? You're being loyal, you're being honest, you're honorable, and when you enter in with this, at no point then will you get anxious by thinking back and going, was I or wasn't I? Because you entered into these things with people, showing them respect as you're dealing with them and stuff like that. Because people say to me, if I'm showing respect to somebody and they're not being respectful back, what do I do? I said, just walk away.
Yeah.
Just walk away. If you come outside and you have the potential not to fight, and there are 4 big, huge guys out there, are you going to fight or are you going to walk away? There's going to be a fight you'll never win, because this is how that person is, and just walk away.
It's funny how the ego plays us, right? It's so simple. Just walk away. But no, I need to prove I'm better. No, I'll be back.
Yeah. So for myself, excuse me, somebody's just done something on here. I need to just get rid of it. And ego, pride, and anger for myself very often. Most of the time, after you've worked to the doors for a good few years, people are insulting you. Don't particularly tend to care much, But one of the reasons I had a lot of lumps, I'd often come home with lumps, is because if I'm stood on the door and I'm not letting somebody in, and I have one of my Nigerian doormen was 6'4" and built like this, the other one was, one of my other doormen was another big guy. Who did like lots of strength activities, and he's towering over me, and you're angry because I won't let you in, and you look there and you look there, and then you look at me. I know what's going to happen. And then it's getting punched in the face over it, So, and interestingly, we spoke about the effectiveness of techniques in a Goshin manner, and one of the ones this genuinely happened. I was working at a nightclub, and the nightclub was downstairs. She paid as you came in, you went down the stairs, and it was very popular. And a massive fight had happened in the area where you pay. It just all kicked off, So we went up there to deal with it. And I can't remember how it happened, but we ended up doing the worst thing possible. We went outside with it. So we gone outside with it. I think if I remember correctly, one of my doormen got bottled. He got hit with a bottle. It didn't break, but it split him open, because bottles don't break like they do in the films. You hear this, they don't break like they do in the films, and it split him open. And I think we got all a bit enraged by this. But anyway, forget it. So I'm outside, and I'm like fighting with one guy, and I've got him pinned against the wall, and his friend came running down and drove his knee into my thigh at speed with power. Boom, so oosh, like this. But I turned, it was like, Ucha, turned, got hold of him, right? And then just hit him, Everything cooled down, walked back in, kind of limping slightly. Your men in those kind of circumstances, we debrief with humor. You make jokes about the whole thing, you just turn around, you just go like, was that you screaming like a girl? And you go like, no. It's very misogynistic, it's very male-centered, it's very masculine, but it's our way of dealing with which was a particularly horrendous situation. Most doormen I know deal with stuff with humor, and you can end up with a horrendous nickname if you do something dreadfully wrong during a fight. and I was quite fine. I said, one of them little bleep, 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 right? I says, threw a knee into my thigh. Oh my God, man. I says, it was just like this. I says, oh, what did you do? Oh, man. And then I went to walk down the stairs, and I just fell down the stairs. My leg was incapable of holding me. And the point I made with this at the summer camp, the Ashihara winter camp, I said, it was a great technique 20 minutes after. Right? At the time, it wasn't a great technique. I mean, don't get me wrong, getting out of bed the next day for 3 days, I looked like I'd been shot in a war or something, and I was limping about I was like Quasimodo. My leg was in so much pain. But that's a happy event for him. I mean, to know that for 3 days I was in pain. But at the time when he required it to work, it didn't work. And I'm saying, this is what you have to make certain. If you're going to come in and then like go into like Kyokushin or Ashihara and like just punch the chest when somebody comes in, and he's punching your face at the same time, then you've got a king, but he's got an ace. So you have to, again, it's that number system. You've hit him with a 6, but he's hit you with an 8. So if you're both grounded, so I was just trying to say to them, your go-to techniques, you need to, if you're wanting this as a self-defense, if you're wanting this for social, there's a guy called Tony Flores. Have you ever heard of him?
No.
He just one second. This is my master's dissertation.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so
cool.
That was the last ever bare knuckle boxing match they shook hands on. So I use that. But in here, there's a guy called Tony Flores, and he wrote a survey of random sample of wushu enthusiasts. So he speaks Chinese. His wife at that point was a Chinese. She was a wushu champion. And basically what he did is he looked at why do people do it? And he had 12 domains for it. The results were that most of the people did it for sociability. So most people here, wushu as social intercourse and status. Number 2, wushu as health. Okay. An interesting one, wushu as a pursuit of risk.
Oh.
Have you ever heard the term? You ever heard the term mimetic activity? So the word mimetic means to mimic. So why do we play games? What are they mimicking? You see football, you see a group of men like hunters performing as a well-disciplined, coordinated group. Okay, they're kicking a ball in the back of the net, but it's a mimetic activity where humans have to work together as a highly coordinated group. And then you have like boxers. So the mimetic activity there is easy to spot. Archery, easy to spot. You can easily do this, But there's other reasons about why people. So he looked at all these people. He's a huge survey, Wushu, here's one for you. Wushu as an aesthetic experience. The enjoyment of complex techniques teased apart and re-put back together again. you know. Wushu was sports, self-sacrifice. Some people said they see it as a way of being of self-sacrifice. So it was just an appendix in my book I'd written to him when he was still at, I think he was at the University of Peking then. I think that's how long ago. I don't think it was Beijing. And so he did this whole thing about why people are doing it. And I was saying to them, one of the key things for myself is in the term. We are doing, I don't like the term art. I think we spoke about this before. I don't like the word art. You know, martial something. We have to, you know, martial training, because art kind of moves it into a kind of, you know, somebody sticks up a unpainted white frame canvas and then calls it the scream of an existential soul in an uncaring universe. And beard people go, that's so good. And you're going, mate, no. You know. So for me, I often say to people, look, the key's in the term martial, from Mars, warlike. You know, we have to have some. You can't let it slip too far down to the white unpainted canvas. Do you know what I mean? You can have different kind of artists, Cubanism, you know, hyperrealism. You can have all these kind of things. There's nothing wrong with any of them. They're all functional and great. But when you start shifting down into, and there we've got your no-touch stuff. That's a white canvas. That's a white canvas, mate. I'm sorry, but it's, you know.
You haven't trained long enough to discover the power of no-touch knockouts.
Let me tell you a story about when I was a young man. So I used to get Karate and Oriental Arts by Paul Brunton. It's not done anymore. Paul's now died, but it came out every couple of months. Now, Paul was a Tai Chi enthusiast, and I remember reading about this stuff called Chi or Ki, you know, and there were stories in his books about some guy had gone to the front door and then found himself on the path because, as a joke, his Chi master had done this and fired through the door. And I'm thinking, I was training with Kevin Hamilton Stewart at the time. He's still alive. He's an amazing Wado-ryu instructor. I think he was an ambassador for the British Karate Association. I want to say, no. But we were doing like hundreds of press-ups, crunches, you know, all the rest of it. We were getting all that kind of stuff done. And I was going, why are we doing all this? I was 15. I was quite tough, but I was 15. And then I heard about a guy that was doing there was a kind of a mind, body, spirit festival thing, you know, and I thought, and there was a Tai Chi guy there, you know, who's going to be doing all this. So I thought, I'm going to go there. So I was the only one stood with a green belt on, a karate suit. Everyone else was like kind of older, and they were, you know, kind of hippie-ish, you know, open-toed sandals and stuff like that. And he was doing stuff like hitting his opponent, and the opponent was going down. And he said as a joke, would anyone like to feel a chi strike? So I was like, no, because I was getting battered. Wado-ryu back in the early 70s was not like the Wado-ryu you see it now. It was like a really tough system, you know, flicks, shin kicks and flicks for the forehead and stuff like this. So people seemed interested in this. And so he's kind of looking at me, and I was kind of like a scrawny, kind of long hair. It was in the 70s, you know, and this kind of stuff. And he came out and he says, we stand like this. And he stood me in like kind of hikudachi position. And I was like, no, I'm not having this. So I shifted my foot back a little bit. I needed a bit of purchase. You're not going to tap me in the chest and I fall over and then you get a round of applause for it. And he's saying like, or he was like a Spanish kind of guy, but he spoke good English. And he's going like, ordinarily, I would get you to sign a waiver in case I killed you or you died a week later, you know, playing that mind games, you know. But we used to stand and take hits to the stomach back in the day. You know, Kevin Hamilton Stewart really built us into tough little cookies. And he was talking. Now, bear in mind, he'd always done this. And the person had kind of like, and he's talking to me, and I looked at him and I went, you're tensing up. You know, your spidey senses tingle. And even as a 15-year-old boy, I went, you're tensing up. I could see he was turning away. And he made a fist, and he turned, and he went, woof, and he hit me in the stomach. Now, I'll be honest with you, it really hurt, right? But I had enough savvy to go like that, and I went like this. But he didn't move me back, right? And then he just went like, oh, well done. But he nearly got me. And do you know how he nearly got me? At the end, I'm putting on my tracksuit to go home. I had to catch the bus back home, like 2 hours going to every little Welsh town, picking up milk and stuff, you know. And I'm putting my tracks on. I'm very disappointed. And I'd had to save a lot of money to go to this course. And he came across with his instructor. To begin with, I thought he was going to punch me. I thought we were going to have an all-out fight. And I was like, kind of like, oh, because he's an adult. I was a child still, you know. And he says, I need to tell you something. And this is how he nearly got me, because part of your brain goes, I'm special, like this. Right? He says, when I hit you with that punch, I did it for a reason. Because when you came on, I noticed you have a powerful aura. He says, gets better. It gets better. Remember, I'm 15 years old, right? He says, when I hit you with a punch, you threw up a natural, you didn't have to train for it, a natural chi shield. And I'm going, I'm special. and then I heard my instructor, Kevin Hammond Stewart, going like, no, you're not. He punched you and he really hit you hard because he can't do it. And I was like, oh, well, if you're ever around about London or Manchester areas, you come and see me, you know, we'll sort it all out. Shook my hands, all the rest of it. And I remember getting on the bus and going, never again. I'm never believing anything again. I'm never believe a chi shield. Can you believe it? And for a second, I believed it. For the tiniest second, I was special. I was one of those people out of karate and Oriental arts. You know, what else could I do? Star Wars wasn't on the go then, but you give me some Jedi crap. I went with. So, Patty one.
Yeah, but that is very common way to do it, right? They make sure that you stay parallel because it's easy to tip you over. I've got that when people doing the power punches on other people. It's like, yeah, okay, but he nearly falls over because you pushed him. His legs cannot support him. Do that in Zenkutsu Dachi. Can you move him in Zenkutsu Dachi?
Yeah. And that's kind of what I did. I went from here to kind of here a little bit and leant forward slightly. But because I was used to getting hit quite hard in the stomach because migraines and stuff like this, you know, I'd already breathed out. So when he hit kaboom, you know, I'll be honest, it still hurt. It still hurt me. It kind of quarter-winded me, but not enough that I could not show it. You know what I mean? I was like this, you know, I was like this. And you could hear people go, I don't know what they're being saying, like, because all I was thinking about is how sore my tummy was as a boy, you know. But he nearly got me with the chi shield. So close. Anyway.
Because you're special.
I'm special. See, that little perfection demon came out, you know. I told you you were special.
Are you working on any other books at the moment?
I have 4 books I'm working on. The first one I've nearly finished, but I'm using AI for graphics, and I'm not getting the kind of graphics I'm wanting.
Oh, they're rubbish.
So
do you have a 10 fingers, 5 legs, and?
Well, they're not bad, but they're not looking the same because it's meant to be the character throughout. Yeah. So the first book is for 8 to 10-year-olds.
Okay.
And it's all about the Budo virtues, but in a very kind of easy to understand way about a central character. The second book I'm working at that I'm about quarter of the way through is for 12 to 15s. And that's a novel kind of boys. It's basically for young men, you know, kind of stuff. The other 2 I've got, the one that's, so there's a section in this, I don't know if you saw this, where I deal with, I look at the benefits of the Buddha virtues like self-discipline. There's a whole section on here. Can you see?
Yeah.
So the next book I'm doing is more of a drift into that. And it's the provisional working title is called The Budo Self.
Awesome.
So I'm looking at that one. And the final one I'm doing with Kancho Erik van Verenberg, which is the working thing at the moment is This is John Blooming. So it's not like a superficial thing. It links him in. So, for example, when John Blooming was born, the original King Kong was out, and Marx Brothers were just coming on the scene. So everything he does, I link in with history. So it's not just a question of he did this, this, and this. It's a question of like he did this, but this was also going on at the time, and he also did this going on at the time. So I've got as far as the Korean War. So I've had to. So what I always do is I do this like explain it like I'm 10 or explain it like I'm 12. So I try and make the text. I don't want it so heavy and so. I've got insomnia. Oh, read Mark's book.
Yeah, that's it.
What?
I'm really looking forward to your kids' books because my son is actually in that age, and I think that will be beneficial for him. So do let me know when they are ready, and I'm gonna be buying them.
Yeah, I've got to, excuse me. You're lucky you're on your Windows. I'm on my phone. I get messages all that. I'm constantly
Mm.
Sri Lanka calling, sending me a text. So I have a little club in Sri Lanka. So
Oh,
you just
cool.
send me a text. Yeah, it's quite good, but it's very difficult to. So the next thing I'm shifting into, if anybody's at all interested, is I've just bought some, like yourself. I bought some really nice video equipment.
Mm-hmm.
I'm currently learning a bit more about it, and I'm away to do a podcast that is specifically aimed at young men.
Awesome.
It's
That's really, really
specifically
good.
because I mean, like with it's a guide for young men using the Buddha virtues. I'm going to keep it locked in with that, but in a way they can understand. I'm trying to look for so many young men are going off the rails at the moment. Not all, but no, but we see so much kind of violence, and they don't
Mm-hmm.
understand what's going on, and different approaches, and regardless of what people say, boys are very different from girls. There are not just the same species that just each one of them have different moods. Boys tend to be very different from girls. They work in different ways. Their brains are wired in different ways, And one of I wouldn't say it's a problem, but one of the problem, as in most men are not encouraged or do not wish to go into the teaching profession. 76% of teachers
Mm-hmm.
in the UK are women. And for example, when I finished my last job, I was really hoping that there would be a guy come in as the manager. Not because I didn't want women to come in. There's incredible female managers out there, that I learned a lot from over the years. But who do the young men go to? I used to have boys coming to me with man problems. And whatever problem they had, guess who had also had it? Even if I'd never had it. Because as soon as they see somebody who's authoritative, who seems like they've got their act together, if you say, like, that's happened to me, and they just go like, really? And all of a sudden you see the worry drift away.
Yeah.
And a lot of young men are not keen on going to women with these problems, with guy problems, right? Everything from, I've had young men ask me, like, how do you kiss a girl? When do you kiss a girl? How do you shave? What kinds of shaves are there? I've taken young men to the doctors because they've had lumps where they shouldn't have lumps, but they've come to me to discuss it, but they would never go to a woman to discuss it. Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah, I've got exactly the same situation with my son. So he discovered in bath that he done something to his private parts, and he didn't go to mom. He went to me.
yeah. And it's always quite clear that if you've cut it or ripped it or caught it in his zip, whatever happens, it's happened to you. Oh, I've done that. Oh, that's so painful.
Yeah.
Oh, and then all of a sudden, it happened to dad. So if it happens to dad, then it can't be this big thing that they build out. But all the guidance staff at my last school, they were brilliant. They were really good, but they were female. And I know boys that wouldn't go to them to discuss their
exactly.
problems. I don't know if I told you this one before, about somebody I know whose son had been bullied at a school, not the school I was at, but he'd been bullied at a school. And they'd asked, could I chat to the woman? Now, this person I know was a guidance staff, but not at my last school. Yeah, it's no problem. I'll do that, So the young boy had been at school. He's a little bit chubby, a little bit fat. 3 other boys in his year had grabbed his phone, skimmed it on the grass, slapped the back of his head, and played, keepy uppies. Do you know what that is?
No.
With the football, do you keep it up with your knees?
Oh yeah.
He'd done that with his rucksack, right? And then gave it back to him. He was really upset. He went home and told his mum. His mum instantly contacted the school. School were really good. School immediately got a meeting together, because it happened in the school playground. The 3 boys were like, we're really sorry. We're under stress. We shouldn't have done it. It was a joke that got out of hand. Everybody's fine. Shake hands, on their way. On the way home, a couple of days later, so he's out of the school, they jump him. This time they kind of punch him a little bit, throw his phone across a road, and kick the hell out of his rucksack. Mum phones the school. School says, what Where did this happen? This is terrible. Oh, it happened to the top of our road. No, it's nothing to do with us. We can't do anything. Didn't happen in school property. It's not our problem. That's not what they said, but you know what I mean. That's the shorthand version of it, and which is true. They have no legal reason to get involved in it. Well, I'll phone the police. Well, you can do that, but in all likelihood, because they're only like 12 years old, the police will maybe come along and speak to the boys, maybe, if they're not too busy, right? But the chances of them actually doing something is very slight. So I chatted to the woman, and I said to her, it's really simple. You got to teach your boy to fight. And she said, like, what? I says, yeah, put him boxing once a week, judo once a week. Nothing too much. Just get him in there, let him enjoy himself, find the right kind of instructor. So if it does come to it again, even if he only gets a couple of licks in, they're going to treat him a little bit differently. It's like the cat you stroke all the time, then one day it bites you. Now you don't want to stroke that cat. It hasn't hurt you. You're getting very, very reluctant to stroke that cat, even though he hasn't broken the skin. You're like, no, I'm not stroking that cat again, And she said, like, I'm not doing that. That's perpetuating violence. And I went, did you teach him to swim? And she went, yes, of course. I said, why didn't you just teach him to run away from any big body of water? Oh, it's a river, run. Oh, it's a sea, run. Why didn't you just teach him that? I said, why did you teach him to swim? It wasn't just so he could have fun. If he fell in, he could get himself to the side and pull himself out and not die. I'm saying, if you don't sort this out now, as he gets older, if this continues to happen, you get a psychological thing that happens. I know guys in their 50s who were bullied at school and still think about it to this day, still think I should have done this to this day. I said, it's far better to get a couple of licks in while you're getting bullied. I said, sounds counterintuitive. I says, no, probably leave him alone. They'll probably just go on to an easier target that won't fight back. I says, but you're the mother. But she was a single mother. She lived on her own. I truly believe that the dad would have been out the back with a set of cushions, getting the boy to hit some of the cushions to deal with it.
Yeah, it was actually funny. A couple of weeks ago, we've been standing and waiting for Max to come back from school, and there's other dad with the young son, and he came in. Oh, they pushed me, and dad said to him, I overheard it. He said, next time when they come, warn them. If that doesn't stop, punch them in the tummy, not in the face. Punch them in the tummy. If teachers tell you off, send them to daddy. And I'm thinking, like, I said exactly the same thing to my son.
yeah. But the stuff I said when I said it, when I recounted that story at the staff room, right? Almost every single female teacher went, solves nothing. I'm going, you don't understand how a young boy's brain is wired. He'll carry that with him. He'll always remember that stomach churning moment he spots one of them walking up the street towards him. That fear, the sweat, thinking, not wanting to go outside and play because they might appear in the park. I says, you liberate the child when you teach the child self-defense, not self-offense. Yeah. You liberate that child from people who, for whatever reason, and many of these young people that bully have got their own quite sad stories behind it.
Yeah.
When I was in education, in the decades I was in it, we went through 4 major anti-bullying things. None of them worked. Never saw a decline in bullying. It just doesn't. And I always used to say the same thing. How did you think that people at the end, people say, what do you think of the course? And I would say, oh, it's really good. I can see where you're coming from. But here's the thing. There's one thing you haven't addressed in this. And they said, what is that? And I said, what is the function of bullying? What's its purpose? Well, that's a multifaceted thing. It's normally about control. Really, you take it down control. They have an environment at home that's pretty dreadful. They want to get some control, some purpose back in their life, something where they feel that they're in control of it, So this is what they do, I said, so very often it comes down to control. I'm saying, and that's where you have to look. And that's now when it gets complicated, because you have to put a lot of work into that young child that's bullying, that's it. And they were like, well, we think this will work. Social media. People often say to me, tell you one thing about Twitter or this or Blue Sky, the rest of it, like, just get rid of the app. It's dreadful. It's horrible. And I'm going like, it isn't, but the people are.
Yeah.
He's saying, what's the matter with you? A sword doesn't unsheath itself and stab you. Somebody unsheaths a sword and stabs you. It's the person. How you? There seems to be this. Do you know? Sometimes it is so easy to fall into this pattern in your head to think, are the majority of people out there quite horrible? Somebody puts something nice up, and because it's not politically correct, or it doesn't tick a box, or it's phrased wrong, even though it came from the heart, that's good, people then start to try and give it a kick in. And you think, why? You can see exactly what the guy's. Okay, so he mentioned dolphins and he didn't mention whales. How long is his sentence got to be? Save the dolphins. Oh, you hate whales. I'm using that as a really stupid example, but you understand what I mean. People start dissecting it up until at the end of it, the whole world becomes beige. Just becomes bland, It just, I don't know. But anyway, so for myself, I think having a working philosophy, a living philosophy that you can use, particularly when you feed it back onto yourself, you're continually watching yourself and looking at yourself and stuff like that. I think that makes much more resilient kind of stuff, because it involves a form of self-discipline. And self-discipline, so appropriate external discipline, like in a martial arts class, okay? We'll just use that as a simple example for the podcast, right? That leads to self-discipline for the young people, particularly if they want to be involved. If they don't want to be involved, whatever you say to them won't work. They'll still run around pretending to be an airplane around the outside of it. So eventually say to the mum, it ain't working. Please don't bring him back. He's upsetting the rest of the kids. They're throwing punches in pads. One of the kids nearly got punched in the face because they watched him running around being an airplane. So appropriate discipline leads to self-discipline. And the two great things that self-discipline give you is, for children, is impulse control. It works on their impulse control. This whole stopping, I want that. The grabbing of stuff, the taking of stuff, bullying. It works on the impulse control, but it also works on really good forward planning skills. So if your son has good self-discipline and he wants something off you, he'll say like, I want a new bike for my birthday. I don't think Dad will get it to me, right? So maybe if I tidy my room up more, and I'm really nice to Mum. Do you see what I mean? He's forward planning instead of saying, I'm going to ask my dad for a bike, and if he doesn't give it to me, I'll start kicking holes in the wall. Silly example, but you understand what I mean. You end up, and not only that, that's why I say, like in the child development book, never give your child an answer. You must force it to look at societal norms. You must force it to look. Why was it wrong to kick a hole in the door? Why did you kick? Did you kick a hole in the wall because I won't buy you a bike? Yeah. Why did you kick a hole in the wall? Because I was mad. Why were you mad? Because you won't give me a bike. Why should I give you a bike? Because it's my birthday. Have you done everything I've asked of you? Have you been a kind brother? Have you been a good brother? Did you not shout at your mother the other day? Not like you shouldn't shout at your mother. You shouldn't. Forcing them to look at societal norms, and it becomes a really good feedback loop. And when they're an adult, this is it's naturally there. Then they don't get the id doesn't take over, as the Freudians like to say. The super ego keeps it in check, keeps the ego in check, keeps the id in check for the ego. So yeah.
All your books are available on Amazon, right now?
They are, for anybody who is even mildly interested. They are. All reasonably priced. As my wife always says, my wife said about this last book, my wife said, how many hundreds of hours did you put into that? Like over the years, because you've been collating stuff. And I just went, I don't know, so much time. And she says, you should put that out at about £30. I'm going, no, because there's people out there that can't afford £30. But I think £15 is what it is. I think for a 300-page dense thing, which you can take stuff out of and you can learn. If you say like, okay, I want to start introducing a bit of, it's like, you can call it samurai philosophy. If I want to do a little samurai philosophy to my kids, you can pick the book up and flip through, say, honor or benevolence. You just have to change the terminology. We'll look at kind benevolence, we'll change that. You can flip through it, pick out a few points. There's even learning plans in it. You can put them in place. I mean, they're not perfect, but they might be an aid for somebody to be able to want to do something with it,
Yeah, definitely recommend grabbing the book, and the link's gonna be in the description. So go ahead and buy yourself. Mark, thank you very much for your time. Always pleasure talking to you, and keep writing the books because they are fantastic.
Thank you. So it's always a pleasure speaking to you. It genuinely is. I sometimes feel there's a connection here because we've spoken about stuff before our childhoods and things like this. And I often feel there's quite a connection. And genuinely, the stuff you're doing with the Karate for Mental Health is like, that's my hat off. That's actually astonishing. Just really good. And more of that. Keep doing that.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Take care.
Cheers. Well done for listening to all of it. You are a superhero. Thank you very much for your support. And if you could leave us that review on a podcast platform, that would be amazing. I appreciate your time, appreciate your support, and I wish you all the best until the next one.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Check engine light on? Take the guesswork out of your check engine light with O'Reilly Veriscan. It's free. Ask for O'Reilly Veriscan today.
O'Reilly.